$10 million. Marcus Sterling slid the check across the mahogany desk, his gold cufflinks catching the light from the floor-to-ceiling windows. 47 stories below, the city glittered like scattered diamonds, beautiful and cold. Take it. Disappear. Break my son's heart tonight. Keisha's fingers hovered over the check. The zeros blurred through the tears she refused to let fall. 20 minutes ago, she'd been planning her wedding. Now she was being offered a fortune to destroy the only man who'd ever truly loved her. Her hand closed around the paper. She stood up without a word and walked toward the elevator. Marcus smiled, the satisfied expression of a man who always won. He had no idea what she was about to do with his money. 3 hours earlier. You actually brought her here. Marcus Sterling's voice cut through the ambient jazz of Le Chateau Noir like a blade through silk. He didn't look up from his menu, but everyone at the table felt the temperature drop. Keisha's fingers tightened around her water glass. She'd dressed carefully tonight. Her nicest dress, the pearls her grandmother left her, heels that cost 2 weeks of tips. But sitting across from Marcus Sterling in his custom Brioni suit, she felt like a child playing dress-up. Andre squeezed her hand under the table. Dad, we talked about this. Keisha is my fiancée. She belongs here. Does she? Marcus lifted his gaze, those cold brown eyes settling on Keisha like she was a problem to solve. Tell me, Keisha, what was the name of that apartment complex on Braddock Street? The one you got evicted from in 2019. The waiter froze mid-reach with their appetizers, carpaccio hovering awkwardly between them. Meadowbrook Gardens, Keisha said quietly. She wouldn't flinch. I was 26. Lost my job when they outsourced. Missed 2 months' rent. 2 months. Marcus chuckled, accepting his plate. And the foster homes before that? How many? 7? 8? Dad. Andre's voice had an edge now. I'm simply trying to understand what qualifies this woman to become a Sterling. Marcus cut into his beef with surgical precision. Your mother came from the Pemberton family. 3 generations of educators. And you want to give my mother's ring to someone who couldn't keep the lights on. Keisha felt the familiar burn behind her eyes, but tears were a luxury she'd learned to deny herself long ago. Not here. Not in front of him. Mr. Sterling, she said, voice steady. My past doesn't define my future. Marcus laughed. Very inspirational. Did you read that on a coffee mug? Dad. Andre slammed his palm on the table. Crystal rattled. Nearby diners turned. Keisha, we're leaving. Sit down, Andre. Marcus didn't raise his voice, but the command was absolute. Andre stood frozen between his father's authority and his conscience. Keisha watched him struggle, her heart aching even as a small voice whispered, he should have defended you sooner. Finally, Andre sat back down. Marcus smiled, satisfied. Now then, shall we discuss the wedding? Something small, perhaps? At the courthouse. The rest of dinner was elegant cruelty. Marcus never raised his voice, never said anything overtly inappropriate. But every comment was a precision strike. He mentioned how refreshing it was that Keisha navigated a 4-course meal so comfortably. Asked if she'd be more comfortable with a simpler wine. Wondered if her people could meet his social secretary. By dessert, Keisha's face hurt from holding neutral. Andre had retreated into monosyllables, beaten down. When they finally left, Andre grabbed her hands. Keisha, I'm so sorry. I didn't know he would. It's fine, she lied. Andre. Marcus appeared behind them. A word. In private. Whatever you say, you can say in front of Keisha. Actually, I can't. Marcus's smile was thin. This is a family matter. The word hung in the air. Family. Keisha was not family. She extracted herself gently. It's okay. I'll wait by the car. 20 minutes passed. 30. She texted Andre twice. No response. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Come to Sterling Capital. 47th floor. Alone. Against every instinct, she went. The elevator opened onto pure intimidation. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Modern art worth fortunes. And behind a massive desk sat Marcus Sterling, whiskey in hand. Sit down, Keisha. She remained standing. Where's Andre? Sent him home. He was emotional. Marcus gestured to the chair. This won't take long. She sat. The leather was cold. I'll be direct, Marcus said. You are not going to marry my son. That's not your choice. Everything is my choice. He said it like fact. I built Sterling Capital from nothing. I've destroyed competitors, bought politicians, made billionaires beg. Do you think one girl from the bottoms can stand against me? Keisha's breath caught. The bottoms. Her secret shame. How do you know where I grew up? I know everything. He opened a thick folder. Every foster placement. Every bounce check. Every night you slept in your car. The community college loans. The second job you're hiding from Andre. He closed the folder like it was nothing. I also know you genuinely care for my son, which is why I'm offering an opportunity instead of simply destroying you. He pulled out a checkbook. The pen scratched across paper. He tore out the check and placed it face down between them. Break off the engagement. Tell Andre you never loved him, that you only wanted his money. Cash this. Leave, never come back. Keisha's heart pounded. And if I refuse? Then I dismantle your life. Make you unhireable. Ensure every landlord knows your name. Drag Andre through legal battles that cost him everything, including you, because he'll learn to resent you for ruining his life. Marcus leaned back. I'm not cruel. I'm practical. You cannot win this fight. Keisha reached for the check, fingers trembling. She turned it over. $10 million. More money than everyone she'd ever known had earned combined. Enough to never worry again. Her hand closed around the paper. She stood and walked toward the elevator without a word. Marcus watched, already savoring victory. The doors closed on his satisfied smile. He had no idea what she was about to do with his money. End of chapter 1. Mary's commentary. Child, pause the tape. Did you see those zeros? $10 million. Look, I love the Lord, but if a man that arrogant slides $10 million across the table, I might have to pray on it first. But hold on. Did you see Keisha's face? She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She just took it and left. What does that mean? Here's what y'all don't know about women who grew up like Keisha. We learn quick that every gift has strings. Every offer has a trap. And when a man like Marcus thinks he's won, that's usually when he's about to lose everything. Marcus thinks he bought a solution, but I got a feeling he just bought himself a whole lot of trouble. Stay tuned, y'all. This is about to get good. Andre hadn't slept in 3 days. He sat on the edge of his bed, phone clutched in his hand, staring at the same text thread he'd been staring at for 72 hours. His last message to Keisha glowed on the screen, pathetic and unanswered. Baby, please call me. I don't understand what happened. Whatever my father said, we can fix this. I love you. Read. No reply. He'd called 47 times. Straight to voicemail every single time. Her voice. Warm. Familiar. The voice that used to whisper, I love you, against his neck. Now just a recording. Hey, it's Keisha. Leave a message and I'll get back to you. She never got back to him. Marcus Sterling sipped his morning espresso on the terrace of his penthouse. The New York Times spread before him like a conquered kingdom. The morning sun caught the silver at his temples, made him look distinguished rather than old, powerful rather than tired. His phone buzzed. A text from Andre. We need to talk. About Keisha. Marcus smiled and set the phone aside without responding. Let the boy stew a little longer. Heartbreak was a lesson best learned through suffering. In a few months, Andre would thank him. In a few years, he wouldn't even remember that girl's name. The housekeeper appeared at his elbow. Sir, your son is here. Marcus's eyebrow rose. I didn't hear the doorbell. He used his key. He seems agitated. Before Marcus could respond, Andre stormed onto the terrace. He looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, his usually immaculate architect's shirt wrinkled like he'd slept in it, which he probably had. What did you do? Andre's voice cracked. What did you say to her? Marcus folded his newspaper with deliberate calm. Good morning to you too, son. Don't. Andre slammed his palms on the table. The espresso cup rattled in its saucer. Don't play games with me. Keisha is gone. Her apartment is empty. Her phone is disconnected. Her job says she quit 3 days ago without notice. What did you do? Marcus studied his son's face, the desperation, the fury, the love that hadn't yet curdled into hate. Such a waste of emotion on someone so unworthy. I had a conversation with her, Marcus said simply. I presented her with an opportunity. She took it. What kind of opportunity? The kind that revealed her true character. Marcus lifted his espresso, took a slow sip. I offered her money, Andre. A substantial sum. Enough to set her up for life. All she had to do was walk away from you. The color drained from Andre's face. You're lying. I never lie. It's inefficient. Marcus set down his cup. I offered her $10 million to break your heart and disappear. She took the check, walked out of my office, and apparently cashed it the very next morning. My accountant confirmed the funds cleared yesterday. Andre staggered back like he'd been shot. His hand found the terrace railing, gripping it for support. No. The word came out strangled. Keisha wouldn't. She's not like that. She loved me. She loved what you represented. Security. Status. Access to wealth she could never earn on her own. Marcus rose from his chair, approached his son with something almost resembling sympathy. Almost. I know this hurts, son. But better you learn now than after a divorce that cost you half your trust fund. The woman was a gold digger. Nothing more. Andre's eyes were wet, but the tears didn't fall. Sterling men didn't cry. That lesson had been beaten into him since childhood. I don't believe you, he whispered. There has to be an explanation. The explanation is simple. She chose money over love. Most people do, when the numbers are high enough. Marcus placed a hand on Andre's shoulder. Come inside. Have some breakfast. In a few weeks, you'll see I did you a favor. Andre shrugged off his father's hand like it burned. I'm going to find her. She doesn't want to be found. I don't care what she wants. I need answers. Andre turned and strode back through the penthouse, his footsteps echoing on the marble floors. Marcus watched him go, a small frown creasing his forehead. The boy would search. He would fail. And eventually, he would accept the truth. They always did. Across town, in a neighborhood Marcus Sterling hadn't visited in 40 years, Keisha Williams walked down a cracked sidewalk with a briefcase in her hand. 4th Street in the Bottoms looked exactly like she remembered. Abandoned storefronts with plywood windows. Corner stores with bars on the glass. Young men in white t-shirts watching from porches with calculating eyes. The smell of exhaust and fried food, and something chemical underneath it all. Home, if you could call it that. An old woman sat on a plastic chair outside a crumbling brownstone, fanning herself despite the mild temperature. Her eyes tracked Keisha's progress down the street. You lost, baby, she called out. Looking too nice to be wandering round here. Keisha stopped, turned, smiled. No, ma'am. Just coming home. The old woman squinted at her, recognition slowly dawning. Lord have mercy. Little Keisha? Keisha Williams? That you? Yes, ma'am, Mrs. Patterson. It's me. Mrs. Patterson struggled to her feet, crossing the sidewalk with surprising speed for a woman her age. She grabbed Keisha's face in both hands, examining her like a grandmother inspecting a grandchild who'd been gone too long. Look at you. All grown up and gorgeous. Where you been, child? Must be 15 years since you aged out the system and left. 16, Keisha corrected gently. I've been trying to build something, Mrs. Patterson. Trying to make something of myself. And did you? Keisha thought about Andre. About the ring she'd left on his nightstand 3 nights ago, along with a note she'd agonized over for hours. I'm sorry. Please don't look for me. This is for the best. I'm working on it, she said. Mrs. Patterson's eyes dropped to the briefcase. What you got there? Hope. Maybe. Keisha glanced down the street toward her real destination, a small law office wedged between a pawn shop and a church. I've got a meeting, Mrs. Patterson, but I'll come back and visit soon. I promise. Mum. The old woman's voice carried decades of broken promises. You know where to find me. Same place I've been for 40 years. Ain't nobody buying up property around here. Keisha kissed her cheek and continued down the sidewalk, the briefcase heavy in her grip. The law offices of Thompson and Associates occupied a converted barbershop, the old striped pole still visible beneath a layer of beige paint. Inside, a ceiling fan rotated lazily overhead, pushing around air that smelled like old paper and pine sol. A woman in her 60s looked up from behind a cluttered desk. Glasses perched on her nose, gray locks piled elegantly on her head. Attorney Denise Thompson had been serving the Bottoms for 30 years, back when there were still people here who could afford lawyers. You must be Miss Williams. She rose, extending her hand. My daughter told me about your call. Said it was urgent. Thank you for seeing me on short notice. Keisha shook her hand and settled into the cracked leather chair across from the desk. I know this is unusual. Unusual is my specialty. Denise folded her hands. Now, you said on the phone you wanted to buy property. In this neighborhood. Multiple properties. Yes, ma'am. I've researched the lots. There's an old community center on Elm Street. Been boarded up for 12 years. The empty lot next to it where the grocery store used to be. And the row houses on the corner of 5th and Main. Denise's eyebrows rose. That's ambitious. Those properties are in terrible shape. The community center alone would cost a fortune to renovate. What exactly are you planning? Keisha opened the briefcase. Denise Thompson had seen many things in 30 years of law. Divorce papers that ended 40-year marriages. Custody battles that split families like firewood. Criminal cases where the innocent went to prison and the guilty walked free. But she had never seen someone walk into her office with $10 million in certified checks. I'm planning, Keisha said quietly, to build something that matters. And I need your help to do it right. End of chapter 2. Mary's commentary. Wait a minute. Hold up. Stop the presses, stop the music, stop everything. She didn't go to Paris? She didn't buy a Bentley? She went to 4th Street? Honey, you can't even buy a croissant on 4th Street without watching your back. And poor Andre. Lord, that boy looks rough. 3 days without sleep, calling her phone like it owes him money. Marcus sitting there sipping his fancy coffee talking about, she chose money over love, like he didn't offer her the money in the first place. But here's what old Marcus doesn't know. While he's up in his penthouse congratulating himself, Keisha is down in the bottoms with a briefcase full of his money, talking to lawyers about buying property. Property, y'all. Not Prada. Not Porsche. Property. What is this girl up to? Because I got a feeling Marcus Sterling is about to learn that you can't buy everybody. Some people, when you hand them a weapon, they don't run away with it. They aim it right back at you. Chilly, I need to sit down. My pressure is up. Marcus Sterling hadn't driven himself anywhere in 15 years. He had people for that. A driver named Samuel who knew to keep the temperature at 68 degrees and the gas station on low. A fleet of black SUVs with tinted windows that glided through Manhattan like sharks through dark water. But today, Marcus sat behind the wheel of his silver Bentley, knuckles white against the leather, navigating streets he hadn't seen since the Reagan administration. 4th Street. The bottoms. His shame. His secret. The neighborhood had gotten worse since he'd left. Or maybe it had always been this bad, and he'd just learned to see it differently from 47 floors up. The brownstones that used to house families now stood hollow-eyed and abandoned. The corner store where he'd bought penny candy as a boy was now a pawn shop with bars thick as prison cells. And there, in the middle of it all, surrounded by construction equipment and sawdust, stood Keisha Williams. She wore jeans and work boots, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. A hard hat sat crooked on her head as she consulted blueprints with a foreman twice her age. She looked nothing like the nervous girl in pearls he'd humiliated at Le Chateau Noir. She looked like a woman in charge. Marcus parked the Bentley at the curb, a $250,000 vehicle sitting on a street where the average annual income probably didn't clear $30,000. Already, young men were gathering on the corner, eyeing the car with the calculating interest of wolves spotting a wounded deer. Let them look. He'd grown up harder than any of them. Before the suits and the penthouse and the gold cufflinks, he'd been little Marcus from the bottoms, running numbers for gangsters at age 12, learning early that the world belonged to those willing to take it. He stepped out of the car and walked toward the construction site. Keisha saw him coming. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't flinch. She handed the blueprints to the foreman, murmured something in his ear, and strode toward Marcus with her chin held high. They met at the edge of the property, sawdust swirling between them like snow. Mr. Sterling. Her voice was ice. This is a surprise. Is it? Marcus gestured at the chaos around them. Workers hauling lumber, the skeleton of scaffolding rising against the gray sky. You're still in my city. Still spending my money. Did you think I wouldn't notice? I was hoping you wouldn't care. You got what you wanted. I'm out of Andre's life. What I wanted was for you to disappear. Take the money and vanish. Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice. Instead, you're here. In my old neighborhood. Making noise. Drawing attention. What? Keisha met his gaze without wavering. I have unfinished business. What business could you possibly have in the bottoms? That's not your concern. Everything in this city is my concern. Marcus looked past her at the building taking shape. The old community center. He recognized it now. The place where his mother used to take him for free meals when there wasn't enough money for dinner. Where he'd learned to play basketball on cracked concrete courts. Where a retired teacher named Mr. Williams had taught him to read when the public schools gave up on him. The memory hit him like a fist to the chest. He pushed it down. You're renovating this dump? He forced a laugh. Is this your plan? Flip some properties, squeeze a few more dollars out of me? I hate to disappoint you, sweetheart, but real estate in the bottoms isn't exactly a growth investment. I'm not flipping anything. Then what are you doing? Keisha smiled, a cold, mysterious curve of her lips that made Marcus's stomach tighten with something he hadn't felt in decades. Uncertainty. When it's ready, she said, you'll be the first to know. She turned and walked back toward the construction site, dismissing him like he was nobody, like he was just another obstacle to be stepped over and forgotten. Marcus stood there, sawdust settling on his Italian leather shoes, and felt something dangerous stirring in his chest. The drive back to Manhattan should have taken 40 minutes. Instead, Marcus found himself circling the bottoms like a ghost haunting the scene of his own death. He drove past the apartment building where he'd grown up, now condemned, windows boarded, walls covered in graffiti that would have gotten someone killed in his day. He drove past the church where his mother had prayed every Sunday, believing God would deliver them from poverty if she just had enough faith. He drove past the alley where he'd first sold drugs at 14, deciding that God wasn't coming and he'd have to deliver himself. His mother never knew about that. Sarah Sterling worked 3 jobs to keep her son fed and clothed, scrubbing rich people's floors on her hands and knees while Marcus sat in their cramped apartment, dreaming of the day he'd make them all pay. She died believing her son was clean, died believing the money he used to buy her a house in Queens came from scholarships and hard work, not from corners and crews and things he'd never speak about. The guilt had faded over the years, buried under success and wealth and the convenient amnesia of the powerful. But driving through these streets, seeing Keisha standing where his mother used to stand, Marcus pulled the Bentley to the side of the road, his hands shaking. He needed a drink. He needed to get out of here. He needed to. The car shuddered. A grinding sound came from somewhere beneath him, followed by a rhythmic flapping that could only mean one thing. Flat tire. Perfect, Marcus muttered. He pulled out his phone to call for roadside assistance, but the signal was weak, one bar flickering in and out like a dying heartbeat. He stepped out of the car and assessed the damage. The rear passenger tire was completely shredded, probably from the broken glass that littered these streets like confetti. He had a spare in the trunk, but Marcus Sterling hadn't changed a tire since 1987. The young men from the corner were already moving toward him. There were 4 of them, all wearing white t-shirts and hard expressions. The leader was tall and lean, maybe 19, with eyes that had seemed too much too young. Marcus recognized that look. He'd worn it himself once. Nice car, the leader said. You lost, old man. Marcus's hand tightened on his phone. 1 bar. Not enough for a call. Maybe a text, but to whom? The police? By the time they arrived, he'd be another statistic. Just a flat tire. Marcus kept his voice steady. I'll be out of your way in a moment. You'll be out of our way when we say so. The young man circled the Bentley, running his fingers along the hood. What's a car like this cost? 100,000? 2. Something like that. And you just drove it down here? To the bottoms. The young man laughed, and his crew laughed with him. Either you're stupid, or you've got a death wish. Which is it? Marcus felt the old instincts rising, the survival reflexes that had kept him alive in streets just like these. Talk fast. Show no fear. Find an angle. I grew up here, he said. Long time ago. That's so. The leader's expression didn't change. Then you should know better. He stepped closer. Marcus could smell cigarettes and cheap cologne, could see the outline of something heavy in his waistband. This was it. 40 years of climbing, scheming, conquering, and it would end here, on the same streets where it all began. Then one of the younger crew members grabbed the leader's arm. Hold up, Dre. The kid was maybe 17, baby-faced beneath his tough exterior. I know this guy. The leader, Dre, paused. What you mean you know him? He's the one Miss Keisha was talking to earlier. At the construction site. The kid pointed at Marcus. She said he was important to the project. Said we're supposed to leave him alone. Dre's eyes narrowed. Miss Keisha said that. I heard it myself. She said, that man's got business here. Don't touch him or his property. The tension held for a long moment. Then, slowly, Dre stepped back. He said. Miss Keisha's good people. She's trying to help the neighborhood. He looked at Marcus with something like disgust. You're lucky she vouched for you, old man. We don't usually let outsiders leave the bottoms with their wallets. The young kid who'd spoken up was already moving to the trunk. Pop it open. I'll change the tire. Marcus stared at him. You don't have to. Miss Keisha said you're important. The kid shrugged. So you're important. 15 minutes later, Marcus sat in his Bentley with a fresh tire and a spinning mind. The kid, his name was Jalen, had worked quickly and efficiently, refusing any offer of payment. When Marcus tried to press a $100 bill into his hand, Jalen just shook his head. Miss Keisha's already paying me. I'm on her crew now, learning construction. A small smile crossed his face. She says everybody deserves a second chance, even people like me. Now Marcus drove slowly through the streets, the $100 bill still clutched in his hand. Keisha had been here less than a week. In that time, she'd commanded more respect than Marcus had earned in 40 years of success. She'd done it without money, without threats, without power. How? He didn't have an answer. But for the first time in decades, Marcus Sterling was genuinely curious about someone other than himself. And that terrified him more than any gun. End of chapter 3. Mary's commentary. Oh, she is bold. Standing in the dust in her work boots telling the billionaire to back up? I like her. I like her a lot. But did y'all see Marcus's face when he was driving through that neighborhood? That man was having a whole spiritual crisis behind that steering wheel. Thinking about his mama. Thinking about where he came from. Trying to pretend he wasn't shaking in his Italian leather loafers. And then, oh, this is the good part. Keisha's name saved him. Those boys were about to introduce Marcus to the wrong side of the bottoms, and all it took was 2 words. MS. Keisha. Suddenly, everybody's changing tires and talking about second chances. She's been there a week, y'all. 1 week. And she's already got more loyalty than Marcus bought in a lifetime. Something's changing in that old man. Did you see it? That little crack in the armor? That's called humility trying to break through. And honey, it's about 40 years overdue. Lord, this story's getting good. Let me refill my tea. Jalen's hands were still dirty from changing the tire when he walked into the community center. The place was chaos in the best way, sawdust floating in the afternoon light, workers shouting measurements across half-finished rooms, the smell of fresh lumber mixing with decades of neglect being scrubbed away. In the middle of it all stood Keisha, pointing at blueprints while 3 contractors nodded along. She saw Jalen and held up a finger. 1 minute. He waited by the door, watching her work. 2 weeks ago, he'd been running packages for Dre's crew, making enough to help his grandmother with rent, but not enough to feel like a human being. Then this woman showed up out of nowhere, started hiring local kids for construction work, paying fair wages, treating them like they mattered. His grandmother cried when he told her he was going legit, said it was an answer to prayer. Keisha finished with the contractors and walked over, pulling off her hard hat. Jalen, I heard you had an interesting afternoon. Yes, ma'am. He shifted his weight. That man in the Bentley, the one you told us to leave alone. Dre and the boys caught him with a flat tire. Keisha's expression didn't change. And I changed it for him. Like you said. Good. She studied his face. Did he try to give you money? $100. I didn't take it. Something flickered in Keisha's eyes. Pride, maybe. She put a hand on his shoulder. You did the right thing. That man, he's complicated. But he's part of why we're able to do all this. Jalen frowned. He didn't seem like he wanted to help anybody. Seemed scared mostly. Fear and help aren't mutually exclusive. Keisha glanced out the window, where the afternoon sun was painting the bottoms in shades of gold. Sometimes people need to be scared before they can be saved. Go on home to your grandma. Same time tomorrow. Yes, ma'am. Jalen headed for the door, then paused. Miss Keisha? That man, who is he to you? Keisha was quiet for a long moment. He's the man who tried to buy my soul. And he's the man whose soul I'm trying to save. Jalen didn't understand, but he nodded anyway. Some things weren't meant to be understood. Just accepted. 3 days later, Marcus Sterling sat in his office at midnight, staring at a photograph. The picture was old, faded color from the 70s, edges soft with age. A young woman in a maid's uniform stood outside a brownstone, her smile tired but proud. Her hand rested on the shoulder of a boy in second-hand clothes, maybe 10 years old, skinny and serious-eyed. Sarah Sterling, his mother, the woman who'd scrubbed floors so he could have textbooks, who'd gone without meals so he could eat, who'd died in a house he'd bought with dirty money, believing her son was a self-made success story. He'd kept the photograph in his desk for 30 years. Never looked at it. Couldn't bear to. Tonight, he couldn't stop looking. The intercom buzzed. Mr. Sterling? Your son is here. Marcus quickly slid the photograph into a drawer. Send him in. Andre walked in looking marginally better than the last time. He'd shaved, at least, and his clothes were clean. But his eyes still carried that hollow look of a man who'd lost something he couldn't replace. "Dad." Andre sat down without being invited. "We need to talk. If this is about Keisha again." "It's not. Not exactly." Andre leaned forward. "I've been doing some research. Hiring a private investigator. Trying to figure out where she went." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I told you. She doesn't want to be found. That's the thing. She's not hiding." Andre pulled out his phone, showed Marcus a photograph. "She's in the bottoms. She's been there for 2 weeks. She's renovating the old community center on Elm Street." Marcus said nothing. "You knew?" Andre's voice hardened. "You knew she was still here, and you didn't tell me. I found out recently. And yes, I chose not to mention it." "Why?" "Because what she's doing doesn't concern you. Your relationship is over. She made her choice." "Did she?" Andre stood, pacing the office like a caged animal. "Because the Keisha I know wouldn't take $10 million and run. She'd donate it to charity first. She'd set it on fire before she let someone buy her. Clearly, you didn't know her as well as you thought. Or maybe you don't know her at all." Andre stopped at the window, staring out at the city lights. "I'm going to see her. Tomorrow. I need to hear it from her own mouth." Marcus felt something twist in his chest. "Andre, don't try to stop me." Andre headed for the door. "I've spent my whole life doing what you wanted, being who you wanted, loving who you approved of. And where did it get me? Alone in a penthouse, chasing a ghost. I'm trying to protect you." Andre paused at the door. When he turned, his eyes were wet. "From what? From love? From happiness? From making my own mistakes?" He shook his head. "You know what I realized, Dad? You're not protecting me. You're protecting yourself. You're so afraid that I'll end up like you, alone, bitter, surrounded by money and nothing else, that you'd rather destroy the one good thing in my life than let me take the risk." The words hung in the air like smoke. "Good night, Dad." Andre walked out, closing the door softly behind him. Marcus sat alone in his office, the silence pressing down on him like a physical weight. His hand found the drawer, pulled out the photograph. His mother's smile seemed to accuse him across the decades. The next morning, Marcus did something he hadn't done in 40 years. He went to church. Not a fancy Manhattan cathedral with stained glass and wealthy donors. The old Baptist church on 5th and Main, the one with the leaky roof and the piano that was always out of tune. The one where his mother had dragged him every Sunday, convinced that Jesus would fix their broken lives if they just believed hard enough. The building was smaller than he remembered, shabbier, but the doors were still open, and when Marcus stepped inside, the smell hit him like a freight train: old wood, candle wax, and something floral that might have been the same cheap air freshener they'd used when he was a child. A woman was arranging flowers at the altar. She turned at the sound of his footsteps, and Marcus's heart nearly stopped. She looked exactly like his mother. Same deep brown skin, same kind eyes, same gentle set to her shoulders. But she was younger, maybe 60, and when she smiled, he realized this wasn't a ghost. "Can I help you, sir?" Marcus's voice caught. "I used to come here. Long time ago." "Well then." The woman's smile widened. "Welcome home." She introduced herself as Sister Dorothy, the pastor's wife. She'd been running the church for 20 years, ever since her husband passed, and nobody else stepped up. The congregation had dwindled from hundreds to dozens, but she kept the doors open. "Somebody has to," she said, leading Marcus to a pew. "This neighborhood needs something to believe in." They sat together in the quiet sanctuary, morning lights streaming through windows that desperately needed cleaning. "You're Marcus Sterling," Sister Dorothy said eventually. "I recognized you from the news." Marcus stiffened. "I can leave if." "Why would I want you to leave?" She chuckled softly. "A lost sheep returning to the fold. That's exactly what church is for." "I'm not lost. I'm child." Sister Dorothy's voice was gentle but firm. "You drove a car worth more than most houses in this neighborhood to a church you haven't visited in 40 years. On a Tuesday morning. At 7 a.m. She patted his hand. "If that's not lost, I don't know what is." Marcus had no response. For once in his life, he had absolutely nothing to say. "I know about the young woman," Sister Dorothy continued. "Keisha. She's been to see me several times. Asking about the neighborhood, about its history, about your mother." Marcus's head snapped up. "What?" "She wanted to know about Sarah Sterling. Said she was researching something important." Sister Dorothy studied his face. "That woman knows more about your family than you might think." More than you've let yourself remember. Why would she care about my mother? I think that's a question you should ask her yourself. Marcus sat in silence, his mind racing. Keisha had been asking about his mother. Why? What could Sarah Sterling possibly have to do with whatever scheme Keisha was running? Unless it wasn't a scheme at all. Sister Dorothy. Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper. My mother. Did she ever talk about me? After I left. The old woman was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was heavy with decades of watching and waiting. Every day? She talked about you every single day. Sister Dorothy squeezed his hand. She was so proud of you, Marcus. But she was also sad. She used to say, my boy escaped the bottoms, but I don't think he ever escaped himself. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. His eyes burned. She died thinking I was a good man, he said, his voice breaking. She was wrong. Was she? Sister Dorothy turned to face him fully. You're here, aren't you? After 40 years. Something brought you back. Something cracked that armor you've been wearing. She smiled. The Lord works in mysterious ways, Marcus Sterling. Sometimes he sends angels. Sometimes he sends stubborn young women with $10 million and a plan. Marcus laughed, a wet, broken sound. You think Keisha is an angel? I think she's exactly what you need. Sister Dorothy stood, smoothing her dress. Now, are you going to sit here feeling sorry for yourself? Or are you going to go find out what that woman is really building? End of chapter 4. Mary's commentary. Did y'all see that? Marcus Sterling sitting in a church pew crying about his mama. Lord have mercy, get me a tissue. This is what I've been waiting for. That man has been running from his past for 40 years, building walls out of money and meanness, thinking he could buy his way out of his own story. But you can't outrun yourself. Eventually, the bottoms catch up with everybody. And Andre. Oh, that boy finally grew a spine. Telling his daddy he's been protecting himself this whole time? That's the truth and the truth. Marcus isn't scared of Keisha being a gold digger. He's scared of Andre being happy. Because if Andre can find love, real love, then what's Marcus's excuse? But here's what's got me on the edge of my seat. Keisha's been asking about Sarah Sterling, Marcus's mama. The woman who scrubbed floors and prayed prayers and believed in a son who didn't deserve it. What is this girl planning? Because I got a feeling we're about to find out. And honey, you better have your tissues ready. Sister Dorothy said it best. Sometimes God sends angels. Sometimes he sends stubborn women with $10 million. Chilly, he sent both. The invitation arrived on cream-colored paper, hand-delivered to Marcus Sterling's penthouse by a courier who wouldn't say who sent it. Marcus knew anyway. You are cordially invited to witness the completion of a promise kept. 247 Elm Street. Saturday, 2 p.m. Come alone. No signature. No explanation. Just an address he'd been circling for weeks like a moth around a flame. He set the invitation on his desk and stared at it for 3 days. Andre received his invitation differently, slipped under the door of his apartment with a handwritten note attached. I owe you an explanation. Please come. K. He read those 7 words 100 times, traced her handwriting with his finger, pressed the paper to his chest like it could somehow bring her closer. 3 weeks of silence. 3 weeks of wondering. 3 weeks of his father's voice in his head. She chose money over love. Now this. Andre didn't know what to expect. Didn't know if he wanted an apology or an explanation or just to see her face one more time. But he knew he would be there. Wild horses couldn't keep him away. Saturday arrived gray and overcast, clouds hanging low over the city like a held breath. Marcus dressed carefully, not in his usual power suits, but in something simpler. Slacks. A sweater. Clothes his mother might have recognized, might have approved of. He didn't know why it mattered. It just did. The drive to the bottoms felt shorter this time. Familiar. The streets that had seemed so threatening a few weeks ago now just looked tired. Worn down. Waiting for something to change. 247 Elm Street was unrecognizable. Where a boarded-up community center had stood for 12 years, a gleaming 3-story building now rose against the gray sky. Fresh paint in warm earth tones. New windows catching the light. A playground on one side, a garden on the other. People milled around outside. Neighbors, workers, community members, all waiting for something. Marcus parked the Bentley and stepped out. Nobody approached him this time. Nobody threatened. They just watched, curious, as the billionaire in simple clothes walked toward the building like a man approaching his own judgment. Andre was already there. Father and son saw each other across the crowd and froze. They hadn't spoken since that night in Marcus's office, when Andre had accused him of protecting himself instead of his son. The words still hung between them, sharp and true. Dad. Andre's voice was cautious. Son. Marcus nodded. You got one too? An invitation? Yeah. Andre looked at the building, confusion evident on his face. Do you know what this is? No idea, but I think we're about to find out. A small platform had been constructed near the entrance, with a podium and a large object covered by a blue tarp. The crowd was growing, 50 people, then 100, spilling onto the sidewalk and into the street. Marcus recognized some faces from his childhood, aged and weathered but unmistakable. Mrs. Patterson, the old woman from the brownstone. Sister Dorothy from the church. Jalen, the young man who'd changed his tire. And there, emerging from the building's front door, was Keisha. She wore a simple white dress, her hair natural and flowing. No pearls this time, no heels meant to impress. She looked like herself, strong and soft all at once, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with money or status. Andre made a sound beside Marcus, something between a gasp and a prayer. Keisha stepped up to the podium. The crowd fell silent. Thank you all for coming. Her voice carried clearly across the gathering, steady and warm. Most of you know me. Some of you remember me from when I was a little girl, running through these streets with holes in my shoes and hunger in my belly. Murmurs of recognition rippled through the crowd. I left the bottom 16 years ago, thinking I'd never come back, thinking that escaping poverty meant escaping my past. She paused, her eyes finding Marcus in the crowd. I was wrong. Marcus felt the weight of her gaze like a physical thing. A few weeks ago, someone offered me $10 million to disappear, to break a good man's heart and walk away from everything I'd built. Keisha's voice wavered slightly, then steadied. I took the money. Gasped from the crowd. Andre flinched like he'd been struck. I took it, Keisha continued, because I realized something. That money wasn't a bribe. It was a test. And it wasn't testing whether I could be bought. It was testing whether I understood what really matters. She turned to face Andre directly. Andre, I love you. I have always loved you. And I need you to know that I didn't leave because of the money. I left because I had to prove something. To your father, to myself, to everyone who ever looked at a poor girl from the bottoms and saw nothing but trash to be discarded. Tears were streaming down Andre's face. He didn't wipe them away. I spent every cent of that $10 million, Keisha said. Every single penny. Not on myself. Not on revenge. But on this. She gestured at the building behind her. This facility will provide transitional housing for foster youth aging out of the system. Job training. Mental health services. A place to belong when the world tells you that you don't belong anywhere. Her voice broke slightly. Because I know what it's like to turn 18 and suddenly have nowhere to go. I know what it's like to sleep in your car, because no landlord will take a chance on a kid with no credit history and no family to co-sign. The crowd was silent now, hanging on every word. This building has 42 units. A commercial kitchen that will train young people in culinary arts. A workshop for construction and trade skills. A daycare center for single mothers trying to finish their education. Everything I wished I'd had. Everything I promised myself I'd build if I ever got the chance. Andre stepped forward, pushing through the crowd. Keisha. She held up a hand. Wait. Please. There's one more thing. She turned to Marcus, and the crowd turned with her. 100 pairs of eyes, all focusing on the billionaire who tried to buy away his son's happiness. Mr. Sterling, I know you thought you were protecting Andre from someone like me. Someone poor. Someone without pedigree or connections or the right kind of background. Keisha's voice was calm, without anger. But I need you to understand something about where I come from. She walked to the tarp-covered object beside the podium. I spent weeks researching this neighborhood, talking to old-timers, visiting churches and community centers and nursing homes. I wanted to understand the bottoms, really understand it. And do you know what I found? Marcus couldn't speak. His throat was closed tight. I found stories, hundreds of them, about families who struggled but survived, about mothers who sacrificed everything for their children, about a community that was abandoned by everyone with the power to help. Keisha gripped the tarp's edge, and I found one story in particular, about a woman who scrubbed floors in Manhattan hotels for 30 years so her son could go to college. A woman who believed in education, in hard work, in the power of faith to transform lives. Marcus's hands were shaking. Her name was Sarah Sterling, and she grew up 3 blocks from here. The crowd murmured. People glanced at Marcus, recognition dawning. Sarah Sterling died believing her son was a self-made success story. And in a way, he was, but not the way she thought. Keisha's voice softened. She never knew about the struggles he faced, the choices he made, the guilt he carried. She just knew that she loved him, and she was proud of him, and she prayed every day that he would use his success to help others. She pulled the tarp. The crowd gasped. A large sign hung above the building's entrance, gleaming bronze letters against polished wood. The Sarah Sterling Sanctuary. A hand up for those who need it most, in honor of a mother who gave everything. Marcus Sterling, billionaire, mogul, master of the universe, fell to his knees in the middle of Elm Street and wept. Andre was the first to reach him. He knelt beside his father, wrapped an arm around his shoulders, and held him while 40 years of walls came crumbling down. Marcus sobbed like a child, great heaving cries that seemed to tear themselves from somewhere deep inside his chest. The crowd watched in stunned silence, unsure whether to look away or bear witness. Keisha walked over slowly, her white dress trailing in the dust. She knelt in front of Marcus, took his weathered hands in her small ones. "I didn't take your money to leave Andre," she said quietly. "I took it to show you that the woman you think I am doesn't exist. I used your money to honor the woman who made you, the woman you forgot." "I didn't forget." Marcus's voice was ravaged, barely recognizable. "I could never forget her. I couldn't face her. Couldn't face what I'd become." "Then face it now." Keisha squeezed his hands. "It's not too late. It's never too late to become the person your mother believed you could be." Marcus looked up at the sign bearing his mother's name, at the building that would help hundreds of young people like Keisha, like his mother, like the boy he'd been before money and power corrupted everything they touched. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry. For everything. For the dinner, for the money, for trying to destroy the best thing that ever happened to my son." He turned to Andre, reaching out a trembling hand. "Can you forgive me?" Andre's jaw worked. His eyes were red, his face wet with tears. For a long moment, he didn't respond. Then, slowly, he took his father's hand. "I don't know," Andre said honestly, "but I'm willing to try." It wasn't absolution. It wasn't forgetting. But it was a start. Marcus nodded, accepting what he could get, more than he deserved. Keisha stood, brushing dust from her dress. She looked down at the 2 men kneeling in the street, a father and son, broken and beginning to heal. "The sanctuary opens next month," she said. "We're going to need volunteers." End of chapter 5. Mary's commentary. Hold the phone. Hold the phone. She spent $10 million. $10 million on strangers? On foster kids and single mamas and people nobody else cares about? And she named it after his mother. "Lord Jesus, I need to sit down. I need to fan myself. I need to call my sister because she is not going to believe this." Did you see Marcus Sterling, on his knees in the middle of the bottoms, crying like a baby? That man who sat in that fancy restaurant talking about what qualifies this woman to become a Sterling. That man who thought he could buy Keisha's love for $10 million? He just learned the most expensive lesson of his life. You can't buy class. You can't buy character. And you sure as heck can't buy the kind of love that would take your own money and use it to honor your mama. Keisha didn't just win Andre back. She didn't just prove herself worthy. She reached into Marcus Sterling's cold, money-hardened heart and pulled out the boy from the bottoms who still remembered his mother's sacrifice. That's not revenge, y'all. That's redemption. Pass me the tissues. I said pass them. We got one more chapter, and I'm already a mess. 6 months later, the Sarah Sterling Sanctuary was full. Every unit occupied. Every program running. Every day, a stream of young people walked through doors that Keisha had opened with a billionaire's guilt money and a poor girl's stubborn hope. Marcus stood in the commercial kitchen, a hairnet stretched awkwardly over his silver hair, an apron tied around his waist. His hands that had signed billion-dollar deals, shaken the palms of presidents, never touched anything more demanding than a fountain pen, were currently elbow-deep in an industrial pot of gumbo. "Mr. Sterling, you're stirring too hard," Jalen said, gently correcting his technique. "Gumbo needs patience. Low and slow. Low and slow," Marcus repeated, adjusting his rhythm. Got it. He'd been volunteering 3 days a week for 4 months now. At first, The residents had been terrified of him, the billionaire in their midst, slumming it for who knew what reason. But slowly, through burnt rice and botched dishes and a willingness to be humbled, Marcus had earned something he'd never been able to buy. Trust. Smells amazing in here. Keisha walked in, clipboard in hand, her hair pulled back in the same practical ponytail she'd worn that day Marcus had confronted her at the construction site. She was thinner now. Running a nonprofit was exhausting work, but there was a light in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Purpose. Peace. We're feeding 50 tonight, Jalen reported. Mr. Sterling's been here since 6 a.m. Since 5:30, actually, Marcus corrected. Couldn't sleep. Keisha raised an eyebrow. Something on your mind? Just thinking about my mother. Marcus kept stirring, his eyes distant. She used to make gumbo on Sundays. I'd sit on the counter and watch her cook. She'd let me taste test, tell me I was her official quality control inspector. A small smile crossed his weathered face. I haven't made gumbo in 40 years. Forgot I knew how until I walked in here. Keisha set down her clipboard and moved to stand beside him. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the pot bubble. She'd be proud of you, Keisha said quietly. This version of you, I mean. This version. Marcus chuckled. You mean the version without the Italian suits and the 30-car garage and the desperate need to control everything? I mean the version that shows up at 5:30 to make breakfast for people who have nothing. Keisha bumped his shoulder with hers. That version. Marcus was quiet for a moment. I spent 40 years trying to escape where I came from. Building walls, accumulating wealth, convincing myself that success meant never looking back. He shook his head slowly. All that time, all that money, and I was still that scared little boy from the bottoms, trying to prove he was worth something. And now I'm an old man in a hairnet making gumbo for strangers. Marcus laughed, a real laugh, warm and unguarded. It's the happiest I've been since my mother was alive. The dining hall filled up at 6 o'clock sharp. 50 residents, foster youth, single mothers, young people with nowhere else to turn, lined up for plates of gumbo and cornbread and collard greens. Marcus served alongside Jalen and 2 other volunteers, scooping portions with the same precision he'd once applied to mergers and acquisitions. Thank you, Mr. Sterling, a young woman said as he filled her plate. She was maybe 19, with tired eyes and a toddler balanced on her hip. It's just Marcus, he replied. And thank you for being here. She blinked, clearly unused to being thanked for anything. Then a small smile crossed her face, and she moved down the line. Keisha watched from the doorway, her heart full. This was what she dreamed of during all those nights in her car, all those long shifts at the diner, all those moments when hope felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. Not just a building, not just programs, but a community, a family for people who'd never had one. He's really something, isn't he? Andre appeared beside her, slipping his hand into hers. They'd rebuilt slowly over the past 6 months. Conversations that started with apologies and grew into something deeper. Trust was a house you built brick by brick, and they were still laying the foundation. But the foundation was solid. That much she knew. He's trying, Keisha said. That's all any of us can do. I never thought I'd see him like this. Andre watched his father joke with a teenage boy in the serving line, both of them laughing at something. My whole life, he was this untouchable figure, more like a monument than a man. And now he's wearing a hairnet and arguing about gumbo recipes. People can change, even people who've spent their whole lives running from themselves. Andre squeezed her hand. You changed him. You know that, right? Before you came along, he would have died alone in that penthouse, surrounded by money and nothing else. I didn't change him. Keisha shook her head. I just showed him who he'd been all along. The rest was his choice. After dinner, when the dishes were washed and the residents had drifted back to their rooms, Marcus found himself alone in the sanctuary's small chapel. It wasn't much, just a quiet room with wooden pews and a simple cross on the wall. Sister Dorothy had blessed it when the building opened, saying every community needed a place for the soul to rest. Marcus sat in the front pew, staring at the cross. He wasn't sure he believed in God. Too many years of cynicism. Too many deals that rewarded the ruthless over the righteous. But sitting here, in a building named for his mother, surrounded by the second chances he'd helped fund, he felt something stirring in his chest that might have been faith. Or maybe just gratitude. Mind if I join you? Keisha slipped into the pew beside him. They sat in silence for a while, the evening light filtering through the window. "I never properly apologized," Marcus finally said. "That night at the restaurant. The things I said about you, about your past. I was cruel. Deliberately, calculatedly cruel. Yes, you were. I told myself I was protecting Andre. Protecting the family legacy. But the truth is, I was protecting myself." Marcus's voice was heavy with old shame. "You terrified me, Keisha. Not because you were a gold digger. I knew within 5 minutes of meeting you that you weren't. But because you were real. Your love for Andre was real. And real things can be lost." Keisha waited, letting him continue. "My mother was real. Her love for me was real. And I lost her, not to death, but to my own choices. Every time I climbed higher, I moved further from who she raised me to be. By the time she died, I was a stranger wearing her son's face." His hands trembled in his lap. "I couldn't let Andre repeat my mistakes. Couldn't let him lose himself to love the way I'd lost myself to success. So you tried to buy me off. I tried to save him from the pain I'd caused myself." Marcus shook his head. Twisted logic from a twisted man. Keisha was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached over and took his hand, the same hands that had slid a $10 million check across a desk, now calloused from kitchen work and construction projects. "I forgive you," she said simply. Marcus's breath caught. "You shouldn't. After everything I did. Forgiveness isn't about what you deserve. It's about what I choose." Keisha squeezed his hand. "I choose to see the man you're becoming, not the man you were. That's what your mother would have wanted. That's what she did for you, every single day." For the second time in 6 months, Marcus Sterling wept. But these were different tears, not grief or shame, but something cleaner, something that felt like release. The wedding was small, simple, perfect. Andre and Keisha stood in the sanctuary's garden, surrounded by 50 residents, a handful of friends, and one reformed billionaire who couldn't stop smiling. Sister Dorothy officiated, her voice carrying across the gathering like a hymn. Marriage is not about perfection. It's about two imperfect people choosing each other, every day, through every storm and every silence. It's about building something together that neither could build alone. Keisha looked at Andre, her Andre, who'd waited for her, believed in her, never given up even when she disappeared without explanation. His eyes were bright with tears and something deeper. Joy, maybe, or hope finally fulfilled. "Do you, Andre Marcus Sterling, take this woman to be your wife? To love and cherish, in sickness and in health, for as long as you both shall live?" "I do." Andre's voice didn't waver. "I've never been more sure of anything." "And do you, Keisha Marie Williams, take this man to be your husband? To love and cherish, in sickness and in health, for as long as you both shall live?" Keisha glanced at Marcus, standing in the front row with tears streaming down his face and a smile that transformed him completely. Then she looked back at Andre, her home, her heart, her hard-won happy ending. "I do. Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife." Sister Dorothy beamed. "You may kiss your bride." Andre swept Keisha into his arms and kissed her like a man who'd found water in a desert. The crowd erupted, cheers and applause, and a few good-natured whistles from Jalen and his crew. Marcus stepped forward as they parted, his eyes red but his smile steady. "Welcome to the family," he said to Keisha. "For real this time." Keisha hugged him, the man who'd tried to destroy her, now holding her like a daughter. "Thank you," she whispered, "for letting yourself be saved." That night, after the dancing and the cake and the tearful toasts, Marcus stood alone on the sanctuary's rooftop. The city stretched out before him, the gleaming towers of Manhattan in the distance, the humble rooftops of the bottoms at his feet. Somewhere between them, he'd lost himself. Somewhere between them, he'd been found. His phone buzzed. A text from his accountant. "Sir, you've donated $47 million this year. At this rate, your net worth will be significantly reduced within a decade. Are you certain you wish to continue?" Marcus typed back without hesitation, "Continue, and find more places that need help." He pocketed the phone and looked up at the stars, barely visible through the city lights, but there if you knew where to look. "I hope you can see this, Mama," he said quietly. "I hope you know I'm finally trying to make it right." The wind rustled softly, carrying the distant sound of laughter from the reception below. It might have been imagination, but Marcus could have sworn it sounded like his mother's voice, warm and proud across the decades. "That's my boy. That's my beautiful boy." He smiled and went back downstairs, ready to dance at his son's wedding like a man who'd finally come home. The end. Mary's commentary. Pass me the tissues. Pass me the whole box. Y'all, I can't. I need a minute. Marcus Sterling in a hairnet serving gumbo at 5:30 in the morning? Donating $47 million like it's nothing? Dancing at his son's wedding like a man with a whole new heart? This is what redemption looks like, y'all. Not perfect. Not pretty. Just a stubborn old man who finally stopped running from himself and started running towards something that mattered. And Keisha. Oh, my girl Keisha. She walked into that fancy restaurant with nothing but pearls and pride, and she walked out with a billionaire's soul in her pocket. She didn't just win the man, she won the war. She won Marcus's respect, the neighborhood's future, and a love story that'll be told for generations. But here's what really gets me. She forgave him. After everything he did, the humiliation, the bribery, the cruelty, she looked him in the eye and said, I forgive you. Not because he deserved it, because that's who she is. That's the real Sterling legacy. Not the money, not the buildings, not the penthouse or the Bentley or the billion-dollar deals. It's grace. It's second chances. It's a mama's prayer finally answered, 40 years late, but right on time. Lord, this story done wrecked me. I'm gonna need a week to recover. Thank y'all for taking this journey with me. Go hug somebody you love. Go call your mama if she's still here. And remember, no matter how far you've fallen, no matter how lost you've been, it's never too late to find your way home. This is Mary, signing off. God bless y'all. And keep those tissues handy. You're gonna need 'em.